Good morning. Good morning. If I can get your attention just for a moment, Senator Kushner, we are going to start in just a few minutes. We have my co-chair had some childcare duties, which I remember from the good old days, and our ranking member from the Senate is in another hearing, but I believe we'll give them a few more minutes just so we can start together. If that doesn't work out, we'll start certainly by 10:15 when we are required to start. Good morning. I know it says 10:15 in front of me, but it was 10:14 1 minute ago, and we are convening the public hearing of the Labor and Public Employees Committee on time this morning. I appreciate everyone's patience. Well, we have what might look like a short agenda for some of our public hearings have many more bills on them. I think the bills that we'll be taking up today have great importance to the state of Connecticut and to the residents of the state of Connecticut. And I will, before I start, I want to make a couple of remarks. I know that today is going to be a tough day for many of you here. To the family of Andrew DiDomenico and to all of the DOT workers that are here today. We really appreciate you being here, and it gives us the opportunity to pay tribute to your son, to your colleague, to your coworker, as well as to understand the importance of the legislation that's before us today. So what you're doing may be tough for you. It's probably tough for all of us to be reminded of what led to this legislation, but it's important and it will help people going forward and in the future. So we really appreciate you being here today. It's very significant. And I know, Mike, I already explained that you have childcare issues from time to time, and but I do want to give the opportunity. Why don't I go to our ranking member while you get settled? Would you like to add any comments, Steve? Okay. Okay. With that, we will begin the hearing today. I have been advised that, thank you. I've been advised that our comptroller, who is first on the speakers list, will be submitting written testimony. So we will move to Senator Jan Hockadell. Good to see you this morning, Senator.
Good morning. It's great to see you as well. Good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Ranking Member Representative Weir, and everyone on the committee. My name is Senator Jan Hockadell, and I'm here today to testify to Senate Bill 1030, an act concerning breastfeeding in the workplace. A few months ago, a constituent and a very good friend of mine came forward and told me about an issue in his workplace, which helped for me to submit this bill. His name is Chad Cardillo, and he is a high school teacher at Maloney High School in Meriden. And at this time, I hope he's on the screen because I would like to cede my time so Chad can tell you directly what he was going through.
Go right ahead, Chad. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you very much. My name is Chad Cardillo. I am a social studies teacher at Maloney High School in Meriden, and also a vice president, the secondary school's vice president for the Meriden Federation of Teachers, and also actually a city councilor in Meriden as well. So I wear many hats, and I think that this is important for all of that. So good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Representative Weir, and other members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. I'm here, as Senator Hockadell stated, to testify in support of Senate Bill 1030. My support for this bill comes from my work with a teacher who unfortunately left the district because of the difficulties that she had trying to find time to be able to pump and express breast milk during the workday. She did everything right to meet with her supervisors to set up a plan when she came back from her childbirth leave, and was really just hit with roadblocks and mixed communication, mostly because of the fact that the state law for expressing breast milk at work and the federal law, the Pump Act of 2023, there is some language kind of miscommunication in there. So I reached out to Senator Hockadell and wanted to see what we could do to align that language. It's incredibly important to make sure that there is a synchronous language for rights like this, because it's so important to make sure that working mothers are being supported when they come back into the workplace, whether it be teachers, because of the fact that our schedules are very different than a lot of other employees. They're very strict, and the biological needs of mothers do not necessarily align with break periods or lunch periods. But it's also for other workers as well. This isn't just for for teachers, even though I am a teacher. This is for any mother that wants to come back to the workplace and being provided with dignity and respect in the workplace. Because being a working mother, even though I'm not one, I know is incredibly hard. I know what my mother went through when she was coming back to work, and I know what my coworkers and my family are dealing with. So we just want to make sure that we're aligning, like I said, aligning this language. We know that even though it exists in federal law, we've seen over the past couple of weeks that just because language exists in federal law doesn't mean the rights are going to trickle down to the states. And we want to make sure that we're putting this in state law to make sure that working mothers are being provided what they need, especially for the teachers who, and I'm speaking here for the teachers who might be afraid to speak out to their administration in fear of reprisal. I know that I asked some teachers to speak up and they were hesitant to do so. So I'm here to speak for them and to speak for the other employees that may not be able to speak up for themselves. And just, I wanted to speak for support as well of HB 6408, 6413 for my union siblings, CSEA, CEUI, the other affiliated public service and public safety employees, and also for HB 6407 for our veterans.
Thank you so much for your testimony today. Any questions or comments? I appreciate your advocacy on behalf of your colleague. It's really important, and being able to express milk at work is something I'm familiar with, having had 3 children and gone back to work each time. So I appreciate your advocacy on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Michelle Siegel.
Good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, and Representative Weir. I'm Michelle Siegel. I am an assistant treasurer and I'm here to testify on behalf of Treasurer Russell in support of HB 7046. This is really a very kind of technical fix to the second injury fund language. It deals with how assessments are made in support of that fund. And there's sometimes a little bit of confusion because there's a reference to deductions that people can make with regard to credits from third-party tortfeasors. And it's not always lawyers in the insurance industries who are dealing with these. And sometimes it's read more broadly to mean all third parties. And just to clarify, we want to just make it clear it's actual recoveries from tortfeasors, explained in the written testimony, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions? I see no questions at times. Thank you for your testimony. Next up is Representative Mike Quinn. Go right ahead.
Thank you, and good morning, and thank you to co-chairs Senator Kushner and Representative Sanchez, Vice Chair Senator Cabrera and Representative Wilson, and Ranking Members Senator Sampson and Representative Weir. I'm Representative Mike Quinn from the 82nd District in Meriden, here to testify in support of House Bills 6408 and 6413, which I co-introduced with Representative Linehan, Representative Fazzino, Representative Fishbein, Senator Hockadell, and Representative Musinski. And I will be ceding the rest of my time to Sherry DiDomenico, who is Andrew's mother.
Chair Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Ranking Members Senator Sampson, Representative Weir, and honorable members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today in favor of two pieces of legislation, HB 6408 and HB 6413. Our names are Sherry, Sal, and Vincenza Di Domenico, and we tragically lost our son and brother, Andrew Di Domenico, when he was struck and killed by a motorist while working for the DOT on June 28, 2024. Andrew was only 26 years old. He adored his family and friends, loved the Yankees and Patriots, was an avid golfer, and truly enjoyed his job working for the DOT. Losing Andrew has left us heartbroken, but we made it our goal to make the world a better place in his honor. Part of that mission includes advocating for legislation to both prevent further tragedies and ensure state workers and their families have all the support they deserve if a tragedy does occur. Two of those legislative proposals are before you today. HB 6408 is an act expanding compensation to dependents for a death resulting from an accident. HB 6408 would expand compensation paid to dependents on account of a death resulting from an on-job accident to additional family members, including but not limited to parents and siblings. In workers' compensation, if you have no children or spouse, the law provides no support to your family. Andrew was just starting his adult life and never had the chance to start a family. And because he had no children or spouse, he received no compensation for his injuries or lost wages. A person's value of life should not be based on marital or parental status. Our loss is no less painful because Andrew didn't have a spouse or child. We believe all employees and their families deserve to be adequately compensated for their loss, regardless of life circumstances. HB 6413 is an act requiring uninsured and underinsured coverage for Department of Transportation employees. HB 6413 would require the state to provide uninsured and underinsured coverage of $1 million to employees of the Department of Transportation to cover employees in instances when injured or killed by an uninsured or uninsured driver. Our son Andrew was killed by an uninsured driver while doing his job. If Andrew had been hit by an insured driver, he would have been receiving compensation through that driver's policy. Currently, the state police are the only state employees who have the uninsured motorist coverage protection. DOT employees risk their lives every day to keep our roads safe and drivable to serve our communities and state. The state of Connecticut should absolutely be protecting their employees against unlawful drivers. We owe it to our state DOT workers to protect them and compensate them when injured or killed on the job by underinsured or uninsured drivers. Thank you once again to the committee members for raising HB 6408 and HB 6413. Representative Quinn for affording us the opportunity to speak to the committee today. And thank you to Senator Hockedal and Representatives, again, Quinn, Fazzino, Lanahan, Fishbein, and Mashinsky for co-introducing this important legislation. We respectfully urge passage of HB 6408 and HB 6413. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Typically, we don't allow clapping, but I think that today's applause were really it's just sending you a message of love and of thanks for your being here today and our sincere condolences for your loss. It is unfortunate that it takes a tragedy to bring to attention some of the deficiencies in the laws that we have. But it's very brave of you to be here and to advocate for others. It's really appreciated. I have no questions because I think on the face of this everything is so clear about why it's important for us to enact this legislation. And I feel pretty confident that my colleagues on the committee feel the same way. But if there's any comments, Representative Weir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to thank you for your testimony today. Thank you for coming before this committee. Thank you, Representative Quinn, and the rest of the delegation for putting together a piece of legislation that's bipartisan, seemingly very common sense, and I look forward to working on this as we proceed further through the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see no other hands. Again, we appreciate you being here today. And let me just say, we appreciate all of the work that you do on behalf of the state of Connecticut. And we know that the work is tough work out on the roads. You're exposed to not just the risk and the dangers, but the elements. And people in Connecticut complain a lot about the roads. I've probably been known to hit a pothole and been annoyed myself. Without all of you doing the work that you do every day, we'd be complaining a lot more. So we appreciate the hard work of the members of the DOT, the workers in that department, and everyone who administers that as well. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Paul Rizzo from Connecticut DOT. And I understand you're the bureau chief. We really, when I said we thank everyone, I meant you too. So.
Thank you, Madam. Good morning, Chairs Kushner, Sanchez, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in strong support of House Bills 6413 and 6408. My name is Paul Rizzo. I'm the Bureau Chief of Highway Operations for the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I'm testifying today on behalf of ConnDOT Commissioner Garrett Eucalito, who submitted testimony in favor of these proposals. For more than 38 years, I have called ConnDOT my home. My entire career has been spent in highway operations in service to the state of Connecticut. Throughout my career, I've responded to countless crashes on our roadways. I have seen firsthand needless and preventable tragedies because someone was distracted or driving impaired or speeding. These fatal crashes create holes in families and tear communities apart. ConnDOT crews are in harm's way every day, with our agency having lost 38 employees in the line of duty throughout our history. John Savoy, Darlene Falconeri, Robert Mugford, and Dan Donardi were killed in the line of duty just during my time here. These are my colleagues and my friend. Sorry. Tragedy struck again to ConnDOT family this past January 28th. Andrew D. Domenico was tragically killed by an impaired, uninsured driver last summer while performing ground maintenance on the Wharton Brook connector in Wallingford. Andrew was 26 years old and a valuable employee of our team. He had just begun his life and had not had a chance or an opportunity to start a family of his own. Virtually every day, we're seeing drivers crash into our DOT trucks and equipment. In fact, last week, when Commissioner Eucalito was testifying in front of the Transportation Committee and sharing the frequency in which our vehicles are hit, one of our crews were struck on the highway, which is a daily occurrence. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt or killed. The men and women of the Connecticut DOT put their lives on the line in service to the people of Connecticut every day. The state should ensure that these public servants are compensated appropriately in all situations if they are struck by a vehicle. While no amount of money can make a family whole in the face of such a tragedy, family members should not have to endure an unnecessary financial burden because their deceased loved one did not fit narrow statutory criteria. The state provides uninsured and underinsured coverage for all state police officers, specifically covering injuries caused by motor vehicles when officers are outside their assigned vehicles. This coverage should also extend to ConnDOT workers who risk their lives every day to ensure our roads are safe and well-maintained. Work zone safety is becoming an urgent issue here in Connecticut. Between 2020 and 2022, over 2,500 crashes and 10 fatalities occurred in work zones across this state. In 2023, during ConnDOT's Work Zone Speed Safety Camera Pilot Program, more than 20,000 drivers were issued warnings for speeding over 15 miles per hour through our work zones. This is unacceptable. Our workers deserve better. We must do more to protect the men and women of ConnDOT, those who go to work every day hoping to return to their families. The rising dangers they face from reckless drivers, excessive speeders, impaired and distracted drivers are making their jobs more perilous. These risks are real. They put the lives of workers in jeopardy every day. I urge the committee to recognize the gravity of these dangers and address the gaps in benefits and protections for all state employees. They deserve our support now more than ever. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for your work and thank you for your words. I see no questions. Next, we have Carl Chisholm. I'm the president of the union that represents our DOT workers.
Morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, Representative Ware, and members of the Labor Committee. My name is Carl Chisholm, and I'm the president of Connecticut Employees Union Independent, SEIU Local 511. Our union represents over 6,000 active and retired blue collar and maintenance service state workers who provide valuable services within our state facilities and our state roads. Most importantly, in this space today, our members put their own personal safety on the line every day to plow, repair, and maintain Connecticut's roads and bridges. I am here today to testify in support of House Bill 6408 and House Bill 6413. The Workers' Compensation Act currently only pays out a benefit to a spouse or child. House Bill 6408 proposes an amendment to the Workmen's Comp Act that would allow a worker to recover money when they die while working, regardless of their life circumstances. This is especially relevant currently to our members at the Department of Transportation, as we see more young people than ever choosing state service over college debt. Our fallen brother, Andrew D'Amenico, whose life was taken at just 26 years old, wasn't given a chance to start a family before his life was ended by a drunk driver while doing his job. The way the law is written now means his family received no compensation for his injuries or lost wages. As we continue to encourage young adults into state service, especially into such dangerous and important professions as ours, our state laws need to be adjusted to better protect them and their families. House Bill 6413 would require the state to provide insurance of $1 million to employees of Department of Transportation when workers are injured or killed by uninsured or underinsured driver. Andrew was killed by an uninsured driver while doing his job. If Andrew had been hit by an insured driver, he would have received compensation for his losses. Being on the road is part of the job at DOT, but employees should not be victims of those legally driving uninsured or underinsured vehicles. Luckily, the state police are already covered under this policy. So extending this policy to also cover DOT workers will be an easy lift. It is obvious next step is creating fairness in our highways. It isn't often that you get the chance to pass legislation that so immediately touches the lives of everyday people in this building. But that's exactly what these bills have the ability to do. No one should have to worry about whether they will lose their lives to their job every day they have their homes. But that's what every one of our members on the highway do every single day. Andrew and his family paid the ultimate price to the state of Connecticut, and I urge the committee to support these bills in an attempt to make future families whole. I thank you.
Thank you, Carl. I don't see any comments. I think, you know, I said it before, there's just nothing to say. This is something we need to do. I wish we would have seen this as a need, and it didn't take this tragedy to bring it to our attention. But
It is.
you have, and hopefully we'll be able to make this happen this session. I'm sure there are other things we could do too to address drivers who speed. We just need to do more on that. There's no excuse for that.
It is unfortunate. I mean, as I said yesterday in my testimony, their highway is their office. This is, you know, where you guys are, your office is here. And all they want to do is have some type of protection. At the end of the day, you know, we want to come home. That's it. And, you know, we've been fighting since I got in the office, fighting for safety. We finally got the cameras, which was great. You know, that's one tool in our toolbox. You know, can we prevent everyone from, you know, acting like they should? No, but the more tools we have in our toolbox, I think would help, you know, in this case, especially Andrew's family, you know. So once again, I thank you, and hopefully we can do something to make things a little easier for our members.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for being with us today. Next, we have Ed Hawthorne. President of the Connecticut AFL-CIO.
Good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Ranking Member Weir, other distinguished members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. My name is Ed Hawthorne. I'm proud to represent over 250,000 working people here in the state of Connecticut as the president of the Connecticut AFL-CIO. Our workers are in the public sector, private sector, and Connecticut state building trades. It's on their behalf I testify to hopefully 5 bills here today. We're going to start with SB 1370, an act requiring workers performing off-site custom fabrication for public works project be paid the prevailing wage. This bill aims to create a level playing field for all workers on public projects, regardless of whether they are on-site or off-site. The prevailing wage ensures that workers on public projects are paid fair wages on the local area in their trade. It's the minimum wage for construction workers. It protects local jobs, ensures workers receive a living wage and benefits. As far as worker impact, approximately 30% of workers on publicly funded jobs perform custom offsite fabrication of plumbing, heating, cooling, pipe fitting, ventilation, and exhaust duct systems. Union workers covered by collective bargaining agreements are already paid the prevailing wage. Non-union workers without such agreements are paid a lower wage set by their contractors. This is about equity and fairness, and we ask that the committee support this bill. Next on to 2 bills that we've already discussed. HB 6413 regarding the uninsured coverage. You heard it. These DOT workers have a critical role. They plow snow, trim trees, repair our roads. They put their lives on the line every single day. We're sitting here comfortably at the LOB, not risking our lives. We come through metal detectors. We have the protection of the Capitol Police. These workers, most times, have nothing but a cone to protect them from distracted drivers, increasingly distracted drivers, drunk drivers. And in the case of Andrew Domenico, 26 years old, lost his life in service to the state of Connecticut. This is the least we can do, are these two bills. It's unfortunate it takes a tragedy of this magnitude to make change, but I ask you to make that change to ensure that in Andrew's name, that this never happens again. Moving on, SB 1030, an act concerning breastfeeding. This is common sense. It should be already enacted in every workplace. It's unfortunate it's not. And you heard from Chad, my wife had a similar experience where the administration said you have your lunch, you have your specials, figure it out. Let's make sure it is common practice and enact this common sense legislation. Next on the HB 7047, an act requiring automatic posting requirements. There's multiple vacancies in jobs, and we should be posting these jobs to fill them. The state workforce decreased by almost 10% between 2011 and 2018. By May of 2022, 1 in 6 executive branch jobs was vacant. At Demas, there's 600 vacant jobs. We've talked about it here, and it has bipartisan support. We know about the severe backlog of the Wage and Workplace Standards Unit, and also DOT. They're the leading agency in staff overtime costs, and that's due to understaffing. Let's get these jobs posted so we can get them filled. And HB 6407, an act requiring the display of a poster containing veterans information. There are about 132,000 residents of the state of Connecticut that are military veterans. They should know their rights in the workplace. It can be displayed right next to the posters we already have, explaining other rights they have. It's common sense. Let's make sure our veterans know what benefits we have available to them. I thank you for the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Representative Weir.
Morning. Thank you, Ed, for the testimony
Morning.
and for, for bringing these bills to our attention. I met recently with some of the proponents on 1370, and I think I promised to them, and I will still do my research on the open shop side of this, which is I have not, right? We still have time, but you mentioned that, or what I heard was the open shop are not paying their employees, the custom fabrication offsite are not paying them the prevailing wage. Do we know how pervasive this is? Is there any data, or is this on a case by case? How do we determine?
I don't have the
Who
data
is
on
it,
it,
who
but
isn't?
you can
Sure
see the
you-
room is filled with people that may be able to provide you with that data, but I'm happy to follow up with you on that. But I mean, it's an issue of, like I said, equity and fairness. We all know that the prevailing wage is the minimum wage for contractors. If you're on-site or off-site, you should be paid the same because you're working towards the same job. So I can get back to you with the data. I'm sure there'll be other people that may be able to answer that here today, but I thank you for your willingness to listen and work with us on this bill.
Thank you. Yeah, that data would be very helpful. As you know, I'm kind of data driven, and I try to keep, just focused on, I need to be convinced and be educated myself. So I appreciate the data to help me understand this better. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll follow up.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you all.
Next up, we are going to in fact have, so I know we had arranged for a panel to come up and testify. And I believe that includes Mike Rosario, Jay Moore, Michael Colombo, Joe Toner, Charles Denning, and Christopher Dodge. Am I right about that? And if you don't mind, if you will, identify yourself for the record when you do speak.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Co-Chair Sanchez, Ranking Member Weir, members of the committee. My name is Joe Toner. I am the Executive Director with the Connecticut State Building Trades, and I'm here to urge passage of SB 1370, as Representative Weir was just speaking on. I will start by saying it's an honor to be here today with the future of the industry. If you look around this room and you see the folks here, coming here to testify, that means a lot to us in the building trades. Not only are they learning the trade with their hands, they're also here to advocate for themselves and give the true perspective of what the construction industry is. For too long, here, we've been having certain people come up, contractors speaking on behalf of workers. It's misleading. So it's an honor to be here with my folks to advocate for this bill. One of the things I will say is anytime taxpayer money is used, it should be used responsibly. When I got into the business in 1988, all deliveries for every project were made to the construction site. Fabrication took place at the construction site. Now what's happening in this industry is 1/3, 30% of the materials are getting dropped off at the shop, and fabrication's being done at the shop for that same project. The other percentage of work is being done on site. That work should all be covered. It's work being done exclusively for that project, and all workers should receive area standard wages and benefits provided. It's not fair to certain workers to do that same work in the shop and be paid substandard wages and benefits. It should be equal across the board. It's a good way to use taxpayer money, and I urge the committee to pass this bill. At this time, I'd like to hand it off to Mike Colombo, Business Manager for Local 38 Smart.
Mike? Full disclosure, Mike's office is about 10 minutes from my house.
Oh, yeah. Well, good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, Representative Weir, and Labor Committee. My name is Michael Colombo, and I'm the president of the Sheet Metal Workers Local 38, representing over 1,000 dedicated men and women. I'm here today to talk about a critical issue that affects hardworking individuals in the state of Connecticut. It's something I believe that we have the power to resolve. The issue in hand is unfair pay practice that occurs in the off-site custom fabrication. When a contractor bids for the project, they include both job site and off-site fabrication as part of the same overall bid. The prevailing wage rate are intended to ensure fair compensation for workers. However, here's where the problem lies. Contractors seeking to maximize their profit are taking advantage of the system. Working performed on the off-site fabrication work may be subject to the same conditions as those on the job site, yet are often paid much less than the prevailing wage. For example, the prevailing wage is $80 an hour. Contractor may only pay these off-site workers $40, $30, or even $20 an hour. This means that the contractor is pocketing the difference. While these hardworking men and women are unpaid for their valuable work, this is not just a matter of fairness, it's an issue that impacts the economy and health of our communities. When workers are paid fairly, they have more disposable income to spend in their local communities, businesses, and services. But when workers are underpaid, it hurts their families and weakens the local economy. The workers who perform these critical tasks deserve the compensation for their work just as much as the workers on the site. Their labor is just as valuable. They should be not left behind in the system for their valuable profit over people. This is why I urge you to support Bill 1307. It will ensure that the workers involved in the off-site fabrication are paid fairly to the prevailing rate, and it's not just about the protection of the right of the worker, but about supporting the thrive of Connecticut economy. When these workers are paid fair, they will contribute more to their communities and to the Connecticut will benefit. I ask for your support on this important issue. It's time to correct injustice and ensure that all workers receive the compensation they deserve. Thank you for all your time. I look forward to working together to pass Bill 1307. Thank you for your time.
We'll take questions at the end, if there are any comments or questions from committee members.
Morning, excuse me, morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, and Representative Ware. My name is Charles Denning. I was born and raised here in Connecticut, and I'm a proud member of Local 777, Connecticut Plumbers and Pipe Fitters. I'm here to urge support on SB 137AA, requiring that workers in public works projects get paid prevailing wage for those jobs on and off-site as such. Between 2014 to 2018, I worked for a total of 3 companies in the construction, remodeling, and fire suppressant industry. During that time, I worked several prevailing wage jobs on and off-site. I was told that my hours would be documented to the state to go towards my trade license later on in life, and I discovered later on that it was not so. I lost over 4,000 hours that could have been applied towards my trade license. I was underpaid for working these prevailing wage jobs, such as 3 different airports, 6 different schools, 1 courthouse, a Connecticut transit garage, public works buildings, and others. I do not want other people to fall victim to having their lives being wasted, deceived, and underpaid. I simply hope that this bill will be passed to improve the lives of working class citizens who are currently being treated unfairly. And in your current positions, how many of you would sit in these chairs right now being paid roughly 20% of what you make now? Nobody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning. Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, Representative Weir. My name is Christopher Dodge and I live in Thomaston. I'm a member of the Plumber and Pipefitter Union, Local 777. I'm here to urge your support of SB 1370 AA requiring that workers on public work projects get paid prevailing wage. My story is that I was formerly employed at Kovacs Construction Corp in Oxford for the last 9 years. Almost all of our work that we performed was prevailing wage under the Davis-Bacon Act. We not only weren't paid correctly for the work we performed, but we had to take just about a 50% pay cut in our check for doing the same work we did in the field at the shop. It just feels very degrading when you do piping, whether it's ductile, cast, PVC, daily in the field, and are forced to do what we can at the shop for less. It really starts making you question a lot, which led me to look for getting a plumbing license since I have so many years of doing it in the field. I figured I'd be more valuable to the company. I'd get a little more income coming in, since most of our jobs we had involved needing a licensed plumber. I asked the owner what plumbing license they had for Kovacs, and he told me that they didn't need one since they had a general contractor's license. So when a plumber came to our site in Bethel, Connecticut, he told me that Kovacs purchased his license for $100,000, and he was just checking on our work in the site. So not only did we never receive the plumbing rate for the work we performed, but we got paid $20 an hour shop rate to fabricate what we could at the shop and bring it to the field. It's just sad to see some companies take advantage of their hard work and loyal employees and hurt their financial income when they choose to do so just to put the money in their own pocket. I lived this story and more for the last 9 years, and it's heartbreaking to see somebody get $1,000 paycheck turn into $400 or $500 for a week randomly when the employer chooses to do so. So I hope you will pass this vote so what happened to me doesn't happen to other people, and thank you for your support.
Thank you for your testimony.
Morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, and Representative Weir. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Jay Moore. I reside in Wallingford, Connecticut. I'm a representative of Plumbers and Pipefitters, Local 777. We represent over 3,000 licensed plumbers, pipefitters, and registered apprentices in the state of Connecticut. I'm here today asking your support of SB 1370, an act requiring workers performing off-site custom fabrication for a public works project to be paid prevailing wage. I've been in the mechanical industry for 32 years. And over the course of my career, I've witnessed firsthand how technology has transformed the plumbing and mechanical industry. Innovations in time and labor-saving methods have led to a shift towards custom off-site fabrication, where large portions of plumbing and mechanical systems, are now built off-site, significantly reducing the manpower needed on job sites. As technology continues to evolve, this trend will increase. However, this shift has led to an important issue. Workers involved in custom off-site fabrication for state and municipal funded projects are not paid the same. Prevailing wages are not paid the same prevailing wages as those working directly on site. Prevailing wages were designed to ensure workers earn a living and sustainable wage, one that enables them to support their families, contribute to the local economy, and become active pillars of their community. Unfortunately, when prevailing wage laws were originally enacted, custom off-site fabrication was very limited, so it was never included in the language. Today, up to 30% of plumbing and mechanical systems for state or municipal projects are being fabricated off-site. Workers in the off-site facilities who are directly contributing to these public projects are not compensated with the same fair wages as those working on the job site. Despite their work being an integral part of the final project, this is simply unfair. SB 1370 was written to address this wage disparity. It seeks to ensure that all workers, whether they are working on-site, off-site for a state municipal funded project, are paid equally and fairly. A living wage that is not determined by a physical location, but by the nature of their work and its contribution to the public project. This bill would provide equality for workers who are part of the same project, but are unfortunately treated differently due to where the work is completed. As someone who has spent over 3 decades in this industry, I can attest to the fact that paying fair wages to all workers on these projects will benefit not just the workers, but the local economy. When workers are paid fair wages, paid a fair living wage, they invest back into their communities, spending money at local businesses and contributing to the overall economic health of the region. Additionally, providing equitable wages helps ensure more sustainable workforces, which ultimately benefit the taxpayers who fund these projects. I strongly urge you to support and pass SB 1370, ensuring that all workers in Connecticut receive the fair and living wages they deserve, no matter where they perform the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, for your testimony. Representative Weir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all of you for the testimony. And I'll leave this, I think both Mr. Rosario and Mr. Moore, you both stated that the third of the fabrication is now off-site. At least that's what I heard.
Correct.
Roughly. Is that a similar trend, union versus open shop? Is that across the industry?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
It's across the board. Everybody fabricates off-site.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. And in a union setting, union shop, this may be impossible to answer, but I got to ask it because maybe it varies by company. But is there an industry-wide percentage of the work that's done prevailing wage versus non-prevailing wage?
That's a difficult question.
Company by company, probably.
It depends on the projects. Well, like prevailing wage would be state funded, municipally funded, or federally funded. So the housing facilities you see going up today, those wouldn't be prevailing wage projects. Those are private industries building those. So typically in those residentials, is the fabrication that great? No, it's usually more in an industrial setting, a school, an office building, a state building, a capitol, something to that effect where it's larger scale.
Okay.
At least to my knowledge.
Yeah,
But
thank you. I mean, I wasn't
the
sure.
the smaller jobs are not as efficient to fabricate.
Yeah. No, I thank you for that. I was just trying to figure out if there's a percentage of prevailing wage, and I'm sure I could probably Google
I
it.
don't have that number with me today.
No, I completely understand. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Representative Gothier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. This question, I guess, would be best directed to Mr. Toner. So, reading through some of the testimony here in opposition to the 1370, I keep seeing a similar theme, which is that passing this would increase construction costs or increase project costs. We're talking about data. I've seen plenty of data that shows that paying prevailing wage across work does not actually increase project costs. So I was wondering if maybe you could speak to some of that data and how prevailing wage works. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gothier. Yes, I will. I think just as a premise, I would say, and I'll hand this off to Jay, with the UA, who's on the ground every day, making sure this work is being performed correctly. What I will say to you is this: anytime people are trying to say there'll be a wage increase when they're already bidding in the prevailing wage rate market, and they're bidding with other companies that are already paying it, is very untrue. It's very untrue. What's happening is that's the narrative so they can put more money in their pocket at the sake of the worker. But at this time, I will hand it off to Jay. Jay does have those stats for you, Representative.
If I may, I'd like to continue on that. And for Representative Weir to answer the question that was asked earlier about data on this, I did do some data. I took 13 job sites I pulled. There were 23 bids proposed for plumbing, mechanical, and a combination of both. Out of 23 proposed bids, union shops won 14, open shops won 9. These results would lead me to believe that they're all bidding at the prevailing wage. I'll be glad to turn this over to you if you'd like. Yeah, these are bid results sporadically. I took some from Fairfield County, New London County, Hartford, and New Haven County, just so I didn't target one area. So I spread it across the state. You know, obviously there's more projects than this, but this is a good chunk of them.
If you would get that to our clerk, Cameron Clark,
Absolutely.
he'll make sure every committee member gets it.
Mhm.
I want to follow up on that question for a moment, though, because I believe I heard this in the testimony, but from what I understand, the amount of work that can be done offsite today has increased because of the new technologies that are available. And so I think that what you were saying is that when we originally passed prevailing wage laws, a lot of this work was being done and was covered by prevailing wage. But since the technology has changed, and more is done offsite, it was never intended to exclude that work. So in some ways, what you're asking us to do is to address an unintended consequence of, greater technology in the construction field.
100%. That's exactly what I'm asking. Technology has evolved over the years. When I started 32 years ago, prefab was unheard of, maybe minimal, and it didn't work because of technology. Job sites changed, things were built on site. People did everything with tape measures and rulers. That's how it was done. Now today, everything's done with BIM modeling, 3D. An entire building can be overlaid and it can be measured on a computer. A sheet can be produced and given to a person in a fabrication facility. Whereas previously, when prevailing wage laws were enacted, you needed to do this off a blueprint and you scaled it with a scale ruler, or you measured it on the floor. You did it primitive. Now, today with technology, you don't have to do it primitively. You can build an entire project off-site and brought to it and delivered. I did bring some photographs if people were interested of what I'm discussing with BIM 3D modeling of an entire project that can be overlaid and detailed and measured to the centimeter. And then I did bring some photographs of what prefabrication is and the size of it and what can be done with it, how big it can be, how it can be dismantled, and it can be brought up on cranes and an entire building can be set in place. And this only pertains to the mechanical, plumbing, and HVAC industries.
It does bring up another comment, and maybe you can confirm this, but I think sometimes when the public thinks about new technology, we are constantly thinking about it replacing workers. And that's not what we're talking about here. It is not about reducing costs because we've reduced the number of workers that are necessary. This is really, I think you said it very well, about how the design and the measurements and everything can be done now offsite, and but that we still need the workers and we still need the skilled workers to perform this work. And I think something we've always said about prevailing wage work and about public works is that we want to make sure there's two aspects of it. Clearly, when we're paying with taxpayer dollars, we want to make sure the workers are getting good wages and good benefits. That's sort of the underpinning of a lot of the prevailing wage law. But the other aspect of it is also that we want to make sure the workers have been trained properly and that they're going to be doing this work according to the needs of that project, and that it will be therefore safer and in the long run also protect the public that are occupying those spaces. So I think it's both aspects, and we need to be reminded of that because a lot of this is foreign to us. It's not foreign to you all that are here. And I want to just comment how important it is to have folks here listening to the testimony, listening to the questions, because it does communicate to us that this is something we need to pay attention to. When you all show up, we know, okay, this is an important piece of legislation and we better make sure we get it right. So I want to appreciate all the people that are here with you today. I'm pretty sure they're with you, right?
They are, Senator. Yes.
I see Representative Hughes followed by Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to get back to the gentleman workers that talked about lost hours towards their certification and also lost wages, of prevailing wage. Can you say something more about, I guess I'm curious how long this is going on, because I think you had a calculation through you, Madam Chair, about how many hours that you missed in terms of it counting. If this bill was expanded to include that as prevailing wage. Can you say something more about that?
Oh, I mean, they would just pull us off the field and do a week or two worth of work at the shop because we could load down a trailer and bring it down there and put it into place. So it wasn't, hey, in March, you're going to be gone for a week. And then we could plan out our paychecks and figure out what's going on with our wages. Especially when you have a wife and 3 kids, it's hard to do that. But it would be random per job. And anything that we can put together, we would. And we actually worked at Love's truck stop in up north in Connecticut, and we did almost a full assembly of PVC pipe for all their water storage tanks at the shop. Put in a dump truck, drove it down there, and put it into place. And we were there for a week in the field, but 2 weeks at the shop getting paid $20-25 an hour when we, should have gotten paid twice that. So it was just tough trying to figure out what you're going to do with that income. So if this was passed, we wouldn't have to worry about when are we going to get hurt this year, this month,
Through you, Madam Chair, this would provide clearly more stability for the workforce. Does anybody else on the panel have a comment about lost wages and lost hours for their apprenticeship or certification?
Yes, it takes roughly 8,000 to 8,500 hours for the trade licenses. Depending on the trade, the hours vary. But in my case, it's 8,500 hours to obtain that license. Being that they had initially told me that my hours would be documented to the state, and then I found out later on that they weren't. I also found out later on about the prevailing wages that they were going to be, that should have been paying, I should say, when I was making essentially $16 an hour. So in addition to doing the prefab in the shop, building pump houses and things of that nature, fire suppression systems for buildings such as this in the event of a fire, so nobody burns to death basically, or at least alleviates from that happening. More or less, when repairs would need to be done, I would have to go out and go repair on site, go actually to the job site and make repairs, being paid the same rate as the shop. The prefab stuff that has become more prevalent in society now in the work industry is that you're reducing the contaminants that end up going in the system, like refrigerant and stuff like that. So, weather is not always on our side in the industry. We work in the elements, we work year round. So when you're trying to build a very sophisticated and very in-tune system that can't have anything in it that would damage the system later on with how the pumps work and everything like that, having it built in a site, which is, off-site in a clean environment where it's actually in a controlled environment with equipment that you can't bring to the site. Giant equipment, this, $500,000 machinery, you just can't move. It has to be measured and dialed in. But what I'm getting at essentially is the lost wages of it is that the rate always stayed the same, whether it was in the shop or on the site. And in my case, having to go to the site and work in the shop, my rate never changed. And I was working for pennies on the dollar without knowing that. And the biggest blow to that, aside from the monetary loss, is the fact that my trade license, which I should have had a long time ago, I still don't have because I have to make up those hours, that lost time in my life, I can't get back. So with this bill being passed, I think it would be extremely beneficial for everyone all around, because as tradesmen and women in this world, we are the foundation of this nation. We are the reason why this building is up. We are the reason why, you know, the sprinklers work. We are the reason why we're able to sit in here without jackets and, you know, sit around in a pile of rocks taking notes on a piece of tree bark. You know what I mean? We are the reason why everything is built. So the foundation is supposed to be the strongest part of everything. Well, you know, if we can't have, if we're expected to get all the training necessary to build these systems correctly the first time, I feel that we should be compensated properly for it. Every single person at this panel, you're required to go to college and things like that to obtain where your position is now, if I understand correctly. We have to do the same thing. It takes 5 years of our life to obtain our licenses. It's called the other master's degree. So being that we dedicate all that time in our lives to do that, we should be compensated fairly as well. That's just my personal opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Wilson.
First and foremost, thank you guys for coming and testifying. Representative Hughes kind of got into this, the first question I was going to ask around the wage piece. And the second part, you know, I think we talk about a lot of times within the this area of the trades, ways to help diversify the trades and opportunities. And so as we're sitting here talking about prevailing wage, one of the big pieces that we talk about is that, as Representative Hughes alluded to, the stability. And so there are some in certain backgrounds that are not going to necessarily take on this risk, knowing that there is the instability of opportunity for wages, as well as you've kind of just alluded to, the making up of hours in order to get the licensure that you need in order to be able to elevate. And so could you just talk a little bit about, you know, some of those challenges that kind of plague the industry when we deal with that piece of diversification?
Well, diversity in our industry is we take it very seriously. We have multiple entities that provide pathways through, we have a training facility called the BTTI, the Building Trades Technical Institute, where all our prevailing wage jobs, we go into inner communities and we recruit from those communities and we give them an opportunity to become apprentices in our industry. We give opportunities to, when I sit on the JATC panel, which is a joint apprentice committee for Local 777. You know, the horror stories I hear of people not being registered, it's very saddening and working for less money. And it's the young people that are taken advantage of because they don't know the laws and the rules. We all sit here as labor leaders and we understand them and we know them. But the stories you heard from these gentlemen, they didn't know the law. They didn't know the rules. Nobody educated them. Their employer didn't educate them. And why didn't they educate them? Because once they're educated, they want they want what they deserve, right? So to keep them uneducated is the process. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And it's usually younger people that are taken advantage of.
No, and I appreciate that. You know, I think, you know, as we continue to try to work on that issue, this is a piece of that cornerstone, you know, stability and making sure that the work that you do, you have you're being dignified in the pay that you're getting.
Correct.
Is important. But I think the other piece that this highlights is the dignity in understanding the longevity of being paid well when you're in some of these hazardous environments and situations. So I appreciate you guys again for coming and testifying.
The people that work in these fabrication facilities are registered apprentices, they're licensed journeymen, they've worked at their craft. They're working on a prevailing wage project. Just because they're not on that location doesn't mean they're not doing the work that the people do on the site. They're doing the same work in a different facility. The only difference is the address. It's wrong.
Before I call on Representative Weir, I think the point you're making too is that it's the same worker. And I think that wasn't clear, but it has been clarified
Yes.
in your further comments. that it's the same person. So whether you're on the site or whether you're in the shop, you're making a different wage, even though you're the same person doing that job, which I think that sometimes is an important fact, because it's like, I don't think any of us would want to, leave my office in the legislative office building and I'm getting paid one rate. And then when I go over sit in the Capitol, I mean, we would be pretty unhappy if they only paid us a higher wage when we were actually in session. So I think that helps put it in perspective. So thank you. Representative Weir.
Thank you. And just for the final time, I think it was Charles. This is the question I was going to ask. You touched on it briefly, but just the technology piece. So obviously, Jay, you mentioned, historically, technology didn't allow for a lot of this fabrication offsite 30 years ago, if I heard correctly.
Correct. I mean, it's evolved from the 30 years. I mean, it's always increased a
Yeah.
little bit at the course of a time, but now we're at an age where we have called BIM, 3D modeling, 3D, everything can, like I said before, an entire building can be laid out to the centimeter and it can be erected. It can be built from nothing and never be out of square, out of plumb. It's a perfect system. Is there human error when it's installed? Yeah. But for the most part, things are designed with this 3D BIM to be perfectly done. And that's why fabrication has come so far. And that's why it's going to continue to grow. It's an industry that's not going to stop. As facilities get bigger, cranes get bigger, things can move larger pieces. The photos you'll see are rather impressive with the systems that are built, and they're being brought in by tower cranes. It's prevalent. And these are skilled workers that are doing this.
I don't have any more questions, but I look forward to doing my homework as I promised to do, and probably getting back with you guys, hopefully before this, we make this a committee meeting.
I'd love to sit down again with you, Representative.
And I see Charles has his mic on. Did you want to add to that?
I was going to say, actually, to just piggyback on what he's saying, I actually build those systems offsite now. With the technology that we have, I run an HCG plasma profiling machine, and my job actually is to look at the individual pieces, cut them, and send them out for prefab. And basically a lot of the job is done there. That stuff, you can't really do it on site without much difficulty. The machinery that we have is extremely advanced compared to what he experienced over 30 years ago. Now we have robotic arms, we have CNC machinery, things like that, stuff that you just can't bring to the job site and then pick up. In a controlled environment, it becomes more precise. There's less room for error, and it's less of a hassle to have to go back later on and fix something because there was a defect that happened or a failure occurred. It's kind of hard to do that when all the other pipes in the room are in the way, or all the other fixtures or equipment is in the way. Having that machinery, which is to a degree the backbone of the industry now, as far as prefab, having that, it just makes it much easier all the way around, and the jobs get done more precisely, and it just makes everything easier for everybody.
Thank you for your testimony today. I see no other hands, so we'll move on to the next person on the list, but really
Thank you.
do
I appreciate the opportunity today. Thank you very much.
Well, you did a good job explaining it for us. Thank you. Next up, we have online, so testifying remotely is Travis Woodward.
Good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, Representative Weir, and members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. My name is Travis Woodward. I'm a resident of Hamden and an engineer for Connecticut Department of Transportation. I'm also the president of CSEA SEIU Local 2001, a labor union representing 25,000 state, municipal, Board of Ed, active and retired public and private sector workers, including engineers and other professionals at DOT. I offer the following testimony on behalf of the members of CSEA in support of HB 6408 and HB 6413. The bills are important pieces of legislation that regrettably are the result of tragedies on our state highways. In June of last year, fellow DOT worker Andrew Dito Domenico was working in service of the people of Connecticut along the side of I-91 when he was killed by a drunk driver. About 1 month before that, Trooper First Class Aaron Pelletier was struck and killed by a truck while conducting a traffic stop on I-84 East. While Andrew and Aaron were taken from us far too young, these bills offer an opportunity to honor their lives and their sacrifice. HB 6408 would expand who can receive compensation paid to dependents on account of death resulting from an on-the-job accident. Right now, only a spouse or child can receive such compensation. The legislation would allow other family members, including but not limited to parents and siblings, to receive this critical post-death benefit. Andrew was just starting out in life. He was not married and did not have any children, but he did have a family. HB 6413 will require the state to provide insurance coverage of $1 million to DOT employees in the event that any of us are killed or injured by an underinsured or uninsured driver. Andrew was doing his job when he was killed by an uninsured driver. As devastating as his death was, it was exacerbated by the fact that if Andrew had been hit by someone with insurance, his family would have received compensation for their loss. Being on the road is just part of our job at DOT, but the people who do this work should not be victims of those illegally driving uninsured or underinsured vehicles. HB 6408 and 6413 are important to me and the people I represent and work with in the Department of Transportation. The deaths of Andrew and Trooper Aaron Pelletier are reminders that we do not need about how dangerous our jobs can be. I hope we never see anything like these deaths again. I hope that no one has to make use of the provisions in these bills, but because hope is not enough to stop a car, I urge every member of the committee to support these two bills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Travis. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Paul Angelucci.
Good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, and Representative Weir. I'm here in support of House Bill 7047. I will say I don't think it goes far enough. It does speak to automatic refill, but as far what could be added to this is the timely filling of that position as well. I submitted my testimony. I won't read it. I do want to tell you my background. So I'm the president of the 1,375 teachers in all our trade schools. I myself taught plumbing and heating. I feel a little alone that all my brethren just left. But I was here about, I think in 2018, there used to be red line positions that were automatically refilled that went away. I can tell you as a trade teacher, my background is I was a plumbing and heating department head. So when these positions come open due to illness or retirement, sort of last minute, the vacancy in the shop is detrimental to the kids. You heard earlier today how you need certain hours to obtain licensure. The tech system, CTEX will grant students in all the licensed trades 1,750 hours off their state apprenticeship, but they need to have a certified licensed teacher in front of them. So the time, and I got to give you the analogy so you get the importance of it. Your child has a substitute, they're in high school, their English teacher is out for the day. That means for 50 minutes, there's a substitute in front of your child, that one period. But the rest of the day, he has all his other teachers in. When a mechanical teacher's out, a trade teacher's out for an extended amount of time, your child has a substitute in front of them for 7 hours that does not know what they're doing in that field. And that is unfortunate. And in 2018, when I gave testimony, the testimony is the same. These vacancies being prolonged by not having automatic refill and taking out the certain steps that are needed is detrimental for the students. I thank you for your time in support of this and would answer any questions if you have them.
I don't see any hands. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, we have James Demetriadis.
Thank you. Members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee, thank you for allowing me to testify remotely today. My name is James Demetriadis, and I am a lawyer at the firm Ferguson, Doyle, and Chester. And my firm represents AFT Connecticut and their affiliated locals. I'm here today to provide testimony about Senate Bill 1371, which is also colloquially known as the Fair Dismissal Act. So in Connecticut, under 10-151D, teachers can only be terminated for an enumerated set of reasons. Those reasons are inefficiency, insubordination, moral misconduct, disability, layoff, and an amorphous last category called other due and sufficient cause. Now, as somebody who represents teachers and educators and has brought these cases to hearings, that other category is often used as an amorphous catch-all. Court cases over the last 30 years have determined that other due and sufficient cause is equal to good cause. It is not equal to just cause. Every other employee in a public school, other than the administrators, which are considered teachers, and the teachers themselves, are held to a different standard. Your paraprofessionals, your custodians, everybody else, your secretaries, all the other staff in the building are held to normally a just cause standard. Teachers, however, are not held to that standard. They have a lesser standard for dismissal, which is a other due and sufficient cause standard. And the purpose and intent of the bill is to create a just cause standard. The just cause standard is very commonly applied in most other municipal and contractual settings for where there are collective bargaining agreements. Just cause classically has 7 elements, which are reasonable rules of order, notice about the rule in question, investigation, a fair investigation, equitable proof, equal treatment, and appropriate penalty, meaning the penalty is appropriate for the level of discipline or the level of misconduct that's being alleged. Teachers have the longest probationary period of any public employee. They have to work 30 consecutive months at the same workplace in order to be considered tenured. And for the period of time that these individuals are achieving their tenure, they can be let go under the statute essentially for any reason, as long as it's not arbitrary and capricious or otherwise illegal. But once they reach tenure, teachers should be given the same fair dismissal standards anybody else is given, which would be a just cause standard. I would make one recommendation to the committee regarding the language of the bill. I would recommend adding a sentence to the bill to provide further clarity that said the standard of review for all reasons enumerated herein shall be just cause. And the reason I'm proposing that for your consideration in addition to what's in the bill is the bill substitutes the 6th element, which is other due and sufficient cause, for just cause, which is a huge step in the right direction. But we want to make sure that each of the elements have to be proven to a just cause standard. The bill also has one other important element. It also adds a binding nature of the hearing officer's decision. So oftentimes what happens is we go through a whole arbitration process or akin to an arbitration process. We select a public hearing officer. We have multiple days of testimony. We write briefs, we submit the briefs, and then the hearing officer will go through and make the determination as to whether or not the board has demonstrated that there was moral misconduct or disability or
your time is almost up. Please conclude your remarks.
Absolutely, thank you. Making it binding will enable the teachers and the unions and the Board of Eds to have some finality after the hearing process is done. It's a matter of fairness and finality. There's a large investment that's made to go through the public hearing or the hearing process, and so those decisions should be binding on the Board of Education's, and the Board of Ed should not have the opportunity for a second bite of the apple after a due process public hearing. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, James, for that testimony. And through you, Mr. Chair, can you help me with understanding what is the case law history for the lower standard for teachers? Why are they held to a well, I guess a higher standard for, well, yeah, the dismissal, they're held at a lower standard for dismissal. What's the history behind that through you, Mr. Chair?
Would you like me to answer that, sir?
Yes, please.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So there's a series of cases that says because the statute doesn't specify just cause, that in essence, it is not a just cause standard, that it's an other due and sufficient standard. It's a good cause standard. So there were a string of cases in the 80s and the 90s that indicated that that lower standard is the appropriate standard that would need to be followed. I believe my colleagues at CEA have also submitted a brief where they outlined the statutory history and some of those cases in more detail. If they have not, I have a copy of that and I can provide that to the committee.
Thank you for that. I think that would be very helpful. Yeah, I won't speak for my colleagues. I'll speak for myself, is that we've got a ton of bills before us. Not all the language is finalized. And I think, from my perspective, my failure to ask questions or keep it limited at this stage of the game is because I'm still educating myself on some new topics. And also the language is not fully baked on these concepts. So, so thank you for that. Any information you could provide would be helpful to help me understand.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hughes.
Thank you. Can you describe if you have submitted in written testimony the language that you would like to add?
Yes, in my, thank you for the question. Yes, in my, I submitted a 2-page letter this morning. In it, I do recommend adding in section C, prior to the enumeration of the 6 reasons for termination, a clarifying sentence that will say the standard of review for all reasons shall be just cause. And again, the importance of specifying that before you go through the 6 standards is I don't want to leave it ambiguous for a court to say, okay, only if the Board of Ed chooses to make the argument just cause in paragraph 6, if you choose to change paragraph 6, is it just cause? The other ones will continue to be a good cause standard. I think we need to have a fairness and equity and all of them be judged in accordance to just cause. And I think that's what the intent of the statute is.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, you said something about the it shall be binding. Is that also a clarifying language that you've submitted? In other words, in that last part of your testimony, you didn't want the boards of ed to reopen after, the public hearing.
No, that is in the current proposed bill. So the current proposed bill strikes the sentence that allows the Board of Education to vote to overrule the hearing officer and institutes a binding standard.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I don't see any other hands, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. And I'll provide some additional documentation per the request of the representatives as well. Thank you.
Greatly appreciated. Up next, we have Fran Rabinowitz. Okay, we'll move on. Christopher Frixel. Okay. Then we have a panel. Can I please have Kate Diaz, Ed Thibodeau? Well, I apologize. So can I have Kate Diaz first, please?
Good morning. I am Kate Diaz. I'm president of the Connecticut Education Association, and I'm very pleased to be sitting here with you today to talk about this. I'm sorry I'm not there in person because I would really have enjoyed having the opportunity to speak to you at length about this legislation. We feel very strongly that now is the right time to look at our termination statute in terms of this just and fair procedure. And you just heard from one of our colleagues. He did an excellent job of outlining sort of the technical nature of why this is important. And I know that you're going to hear from a number of our advocates and representatives about the important nature of the changes that we're proposing. So what I want to talk to you about why it's important to me as a teacher and why this means something to us in terms of our professional status. currently the way that these laws are being utilized, they have a chilling effect on our ability to have free speech. And what I want you to understand is, especially now where there's so much going on that we feel so connected to and so important that we have a voice in, our educators feel like they can't speak on public matters. They can't raise issues and concerns about the things that are important to them in terms of politically engaging. And the reason they can't is because the way the current statute can be utilized and has been utilized is if we make our employer feel uncomfortable with our speech. That's all the standard is in terms of putting forward us for termination. And what's really critical to understand is that it's actually easier to terminate us than to discipline us. So if I, as a teacher, say something, perhaps about the federal government, maybe I'm opposed to cutting the entire Department of Education, if that draws some heat in my district and there becomes community like, hey, this teacher's saying something that I don't agree with, my administration can functionally say, you're creating a disruption in the learning environment. We have due and sufficient cause to move forward with terminating your employment. And it's actually easier to do that than it is to say, let's review this. Let's think about this. Do you have, grounds to make those claims? Are you speaking as an employee or as you speaking as a private citizen? They can basically just step forward and say, you've created a disruption to the learning process. We have due and sufficient cause to say that that doesn't work for us. So thank you very much. And even if I'm right, and I have every legal standing to make those claims, I can fight this all the way through to arbitration. And because we also lack a binding arbitration in that, the Board of Ed can simply go, yeah, thanks. We don't accept the response of the arbitrator and you're still terminated. So we really end up in this space where we can't do what we need to do as engaged members of a citizenry. And often our legislators like you will ask us to speak up on issues, will ask us to raise our concerns, present our perspectives. But without any protections in the law that allow us to do that, it's often hard. Educators come and testify here without protection that speech will not be held against them. So it's really critical to understand that we just want the same rights as everyone else, but we need this statute to back us up. Right now, it doesn't work. The statute, has this incredibly ambiguous standard that can be applied in any way and often leaves us incapable of defending ourselves. And that's where you start to see things like we end up saying, okay, well, I guess it's better to leave your district if, they come at you about your speech.
Ms. Diaz, your time is almost up. Please conclude your remarks.
Thank you. I think you're going to hear a lot of communication today, a lot of information about why this is so important. But for me, it's also really critical to understand we are professionals and we are highly engaged in our communities, and we want that to continue to be the standard and the expectation of our profession. And that's all we're being asked, is to be treated as a professional.
Representative Weir.
Thank you for that testimony, Ms. Diaz. I come from a family of educators. My mom was an educator, several aunts. My brother is a current educator, and my daughter as well. So I respect the profession immensely. I just wanted to bring some, as I'm trying to wrap my head around this legislation and what we're being asked to do here, I wanted to ask you just to compare, and again, I'm going to, earlier on in your testimony, you talked about this having a potential chilling on free speech, or at least that's how I'll characterize it. And part of it was being critical of your employer, but then you used the example of being critical perhaps of the Department of Education. So can you expound a little bit on that? Because I see a distinction between perhaps being critical of an employer where there's an issue locally and addressing it with the employer publicly versus working together to solve something, versus being critical of the Department of Education, which I want our teachers to have their be able to express themselves freely and professionally, as you stated, but I do see a difference there. Can you clarify a little bit if I, just to make sure I heard you right, or if you want to add any color to that through you, Mr. Chair?
I would agree that there are two distinctive spaces there. One is speech with respect to your employer and your employment, and that is a very different speech expectation. How we are expected to participate in the conversations and disputes within our employment, I do think has a different threshold, a different standard, and a different set of expectations. And I don't think that any educator would disagree with you. Often we have board policy we are bound by that really kind of relates and governs that process. So I think we're not looking to have any shift in that component. What we're finding is that when we expand our speech to things that are of a public nature, things that we should have the free and complete ability to speak on, that are not necessarily about our particular employer, that's where we're getting the chilling effect, because this standard can be applied to, at the moment, anything that my employer says creates a disruption. So the example of the Department of Education, I think, is an important one. That's something that is very publicly being talked about, something that people have strong opinions about. And I would argue that this is not solely a protection for people who kind of have a very liberal mindset. I would argue it has the same protection issue for people who have a conservative mindset, where they would like to express their interests and they work in a district that might have a different opinion. So I look at this as a large scale, and it's irrelevant almost to me whether you fall into sort of a conservative or a liberal mindset. I think each should have the same level of protection in terms of being able to express themselves. And we are finding that if you express a political opinion that makes people uncomfortable or drives into a conversation in the community, and your superintendent or administration or board of education would prefer you not have that opinion, they can utilize the current language of the termination statute to say, you're creating a disruption to the educational process, we have due and sufficient cause, and we can move you on. So I do think we believe that there are two distinct practices, one that engages with your employer versus matters of public comment, and that should be kind of have access to our educators to speak on. So we are not looking to say, and to bypass what we would consider normal, reasonable practices of employer-employee relations and how those things should be governed. This is really the more global perspective of how are we engaging with our state advocacy, our national advocacy, and engaging in matters of public interest.
Representative Weir.
Thank you very much for that explanation and clarification. And I as a absolute proponent of free speech from whatever perspective you're coming from, I completely agree with you. I look forward to hearing more testimony, educating myself on this topic, the language, the legal piece. I'm not an attorney for sure, but I want to understand this better. I'm curious. So thank you for your testimony.
Senator Kushner, followed by Representative.
Thank you, and it's good to see you yet in another hotel room. I serve on many committees that you testify before, and you're always in a different city. But actually, I know sometimes, a lot of time you're right here across the street, so it's good to see you. I do want to pursue a little more on the question of arbitration and just cause. I know that I understand that Fran Rabinowitz testified a little bit about other employees that have just cause discharge in their contracts and in their relationships, and that's allowed. Can you elaborate a little bit more on, why teachers are carved out and why it's important that we include you in the just cause, and specifically, if you can, about arbitrators themselves, because I think people don't understand the arbitration process. And in my experience, arbitrators are expert in understanding the circumstances that are before them and how to read contracts and how to interpret contracts. So if you could elaborate a little on that, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. The process that we're seeking to kind of codify with this language is not just the due process, right? The investigatory, the way that we would like to be treated when there's a question about our employment, But often, if we're at odds with what the Board of Ed, the superintendent is proposing, our natural remedy to that is to obviously follow our contractual grievance process, but it carries into bringing in a third-party arbitrator. And the goal of arbitration is to have a panel review the scenario with an external viewpoint, people who are not invested either as a union member or as a Board of Ed member, but these third-party observers, if you will, who have the legal background to be able to evaluate the terms of the situation, to look at sort of what are the policies, the practices, and the legal implications of both sides of the argument, and then make a determination about, you know, what should the termination status of this individual be. And they could, in fact, uphold, yep, that you have every right to terminate this employee. Or they may stand and say, nope, the termination is not just. Now, the problem is we can currently deploy that practice. We can go all the way through arbitration on a termination question. The issue is it's not binding. So what can happen, and has in fact happened, is we test the case all the way through arbitration, and the board either says, we don't accept the results of this arbitration, we're standing by our decision. And interestingly enough, there is a case in which the arbitrators found that we should in fact terminate this teacher, right? In this case, it was a Greenwich case. And the board said, no, we don't accept that. And we thought that was fascinating because we're sitting there going, well, we understand this termination. This termination should be upheld. And the board said, nope, we're going to keep this person. So there's this very weird construct that doesn't always work in anybody's favor, to be honest with you. So this idea of having this this panel of review, if you will, to question whether or not that termination met a legal standing is really important, but holding us accountable and holding our boards accountable for upholding that arbitration is equally important in my mind. Otherwise, what's the point? Right? If we're going to go all the way through an arbitration and nobody's actually held to the outcome, then what's the point of doing the arbitration? And so for us, that's a really important aspect of this as well.
And through you, Mr. Chair, and just to be clear, for other employees employed by the Board of Ed in our schools, they do have binding arbitration and other with regard to other employees.
Yes, we're oddly carved out. And I know that in some of the response to this, I know that there is a memo out there from another attorney from, the other side that mentions that the reason this standard exists is because teachers should have a higher level of expectation because we deal with people's children. And I understand that sentiment. I just think that we're not asking to be held to a lower standard. We're asking to be held to the same standard. And I would argue it's the same standard that applies to our police, our firefighters, our nurses, all other public employees who have great responsibility for human life. And so I just think it puts us in alignment with literally everybody else.
Thank you much for that answer. I think that was really helpful. And again, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Canino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony today. I just had a quick question about the just cause standard, as I am also not a lawyer. If you could just go into how that is kind of narrowing this down from other due insufficient cause, and maybe just provide an example of what would meet the just cause standard for termination.
All right, I will preface this by saying I am also not a lawyer. I am, in fact, a high school math teacher who has a lot of experience working in the union work. So I will say that I'm going to give you my answer to this, but I would encourage you to ask that question again to the advocates we have that are lined up, that are kind of probably in the room with you, and we'll be happy to give you a lot better information. But for us, the just cause standard provides a legal definition and a legal process by which the employer has to present something more than how they feel. There is an impact of what was the impact of this action, and the district has to then kind of present a much clearer line that was crossed by the employee. So that's what I would say, but I would encourage you to explore that further with Ed Thibodeau and Mike Casey, who can give you a lot better experience with that and give you the sort of the legal piece that I think you would benefit from. So please ask that question of them as well.
I will do just that. Thank you very much.
Senator Kushner.
And I know that this is, we will get into this in the committee meeting when we talk about it as well, but it might be good for Kate and for others that are going to testify to think about it in this way, which is the way I think about it. We aren't lawyers. I was glad you said that. I'm glad we all recognize it. I think Representative Weir said that today too. And in fact, lawyers are there to advocate for a person, so they do take a side. But arbitrators are neutral. And also arbitrators are they're like judges. They really know the landscape. So they're able to rule on legal standards that probably a member of the Board of Education might not be a lawyer either. In most cases, they probably aren't. And so I think the case can be made that it's better to have people who do understand legal standards and contracts that work on those cases all the time. So they are really familiar with what the standards are for a dismissal. And I think that's sort of the point. So I'm kind of glad you asked that question. And I hope, Kate, you agree with me that it's the fact that arbitrators are neutral, are experts, do understand the legal issues at hand, and therefore their rulings should be binding since they're the experts. And oftentimes we are not. I include myself in that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree
More
with
of a
you.
comment, but it was.
I would agree wholeheartedly with you, Senator Kushner, that that's one of the aspects that is really important to us, is this notion that at some point, if we can't come to agreement, it is logical to put that in the hands of a third-party expert with a vested interest in getting it right. And I think that's really where, and holding true to that decision is really critical.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much for the time today. I'm sure I'll see you again.
I'm sure. Up next, we will have the panel that I apologized earlier for calling you up before Kate. Ed Thibodeau, Michael Casey, Brett Pickering. Your microphone needs to be turned on. Just the button right in front. There you go. Okay, perfect.
Good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Representative Weir, and members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. My name is Ed Thibodeau, and I am a union-served representative at Connecticut Education Association. CEA is grateful for the introduction of Senate Bill 1371 and strongly supports the efforts to provide teachers facing termination the same rights other unionized employees in Connecticut have enjoyed for 50 years. I've been with CEA for almost 10 years, and prior to that, I worked for another union representing non-certified employees of Connecticut school districts. When I began working at CEA, I was shocked to learn that, in termination cases, certified teachers have almost none of the due process rights that are found in the contracts of secretaries, custodians, and other board employees. There are two important safeguards missing from Section 10-151. The first is a just cause standard. The 7 tests of just cause are well known and universally accepted in the world of labor relations. They were developed to ensure that employers follow a fair, open-minded process before imposing discipline, conducting a thorough investigation, and giving the accused employee a chance to present their side of the story. The second safeguard is the right to have a hearing in front of a neutral arbitrator whose decision is final and binding. Section 10-151 does not allow this. Instead, a fact finder conducts a hearing and issues a report with their recommendation for the disposition of the case. However, a Board of Education is not bound by the fact finder's recommendation and may choose to reject it outright. This means a teacher could win every battle but still lose the war. The sad fact is that most teachers threatened with termination will simply resign rather than face the daunting odds imposed by 10-151. Districts know this and frequently pressure teachers to resign as soon as an allegation is made against them. This is especially true in cases where public opinion, exacerbated by social media, becomes a factor. In my time at CEA, I've seen almost no teachers suspended without pay, but have seen many teachers forced to resign. Progressive discipline does not exist because it's literally easier to fire a teacher than to suspend a teacher. Finally, we request that the language in Senate Bill 1371 be amended to ensure that the just cause standard applies to all reasons for termination covered by 10-151, not just reason number 6. It's very important that one standard be consistently used throughout the statute, and that all teachers have the same right to a fair and impartial hearing, regardless of the stated reason for the termination. The changes we suggest for Senate Bill 1371 would confer basic rights to teachers that they have lacked for far too long. Thank you for your time and consideration.
We'll save the questions until the panel has completed its testimony. So, gentlemen. Absolutely. Hit the speak button. Oh, there you go.
Good morning, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Mike Casey. I'm a union representative for teachers in 10 school districts in the southeastern part of the state. I testify in support of Senate Bill 1371 to secure for teachers in the state of Connecticut the same basic fairness and due process rights that almost every other public employee in the state enjoys. And that is, of course, the right to be secure in your employment and not be terminated unless just cause exists, and also to have that determination of just cause made by a third-party neutral arbitrator who has the ability to bind the parties. My nearly 30 years of representing employees, I have represented police officers, correctional officers, 911 dispatchers, highway workers, literally hundreds of different job descriptions in unionized work settings. And yet, in all of the time that I have represented public employees, teachers in the state of Connecticut is the only group of people who has not been afforded the respect of having their employment secure unless there's just cause to terminate it. Now, why would we not go ahead and provide teachers the same basic rights that we provide to our other valued public employees, such as police officers and firefighters? I really don't know. But the question becomes even more perplexing when you take into consideration the fact that school districts already have a statutory right to non-renew or essentially terminate a teacher during their first 4 years of employment. Okay. Now, that happens all the time. And typically, we get these notices starting from now until May 1st. And it has been upheld that teachers can be non-renewed simply because they are considered not a good fit with the district. Usually, rather than suffer the indignity of some sort of a public notice or at a Board of Ed hearing, we would advise the teachers to resign rather than have to go through that. So why is there a teacher shortage in the state of Connecticut? I would suggest that it has something to do with the absolutely aberrant lack of job protection and fairness the teachers have in their employment. The other thing that has already been mentioned is that just cause has been around since 1964. Okay, so there is a very well-developed set of case law in existence interpreting what just cause consists of. It applies for all types of reasons why somebody would be terminated from employment. And it applies in all sorts of professions, as I've already said, the various types of people who I've represented. It is basically an analysis, okay? And several people have already gone through and itemized what the analysis is. If there are questions afterwards, I'm sure any of us would be happy to answer those. But again, I would also agree with the others who have suggested that we need to go ahead and amend the bill as it is currently written so that just cause would apply to all 6 reasons for teacher termination, not just the 6th one. The second and equally important change that Senate Bill 1371 would make if passed, of course, is also to make sure that that just cause standard is appropriately applied by a third-party neutral arbitrator, and that it is binding on the parties. As President Diaz has already stated, under the current law, you can go ahead and have a hearing with a third-party hearing officer, and that third-party hearing officer can make a recommendation that someone not be terminated, and the Board of Education can simply ignore that and terminate them anyway. I would liken, as Senator Kushner has, arbitration to judicial proceedings. Really, historically, arbitration has been a means of obtaining justice by a third-party person in a more expedient manner. And I would say, why would it be okay in the context of teachers to say that one of the parties to that proceeding can go ahead and ignore what the arbitrator says, any more than it would be acceptable in a courtroom for one of the parties to ignore what a judge rules on? It's not fair. In
Mr. Casey,
conclusion, on behalf of the many teachers I represent, thank you for taking up this incredibly important bill. And I ask that with the amendments that we have suggested, that it be moved forward for ultimate passage. Principles of just cause as determined by a neutral third party with binding authority have existed for decades, because the decision of whether to take a person's livelihood away should be based on reasonableness and fairness, not personal dislikes or likes or shifting political winds. We've lost too many talented people from the teaching profession, and I respectfully urge you to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you. Hello, members of the committee. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to this bill. My name is Brett Pickering. I'm a UniServe representative for the Connecticut Education Association. I've worked with CEA for the last 11 years, and prior to that, I served in the same capacity with WEAC, a CEA equivalent in Wisconsin. I also served as staff counsel for the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, where I negotiated on the management side of school law. I've served in total in these roles in 25 years, and I've represented teachers and school boards. I would like to speak in support of SB 1371, specifically the proposed changes in the statute 10151. These changes will at last provide teachers with parity with other school and public employees with regard to job security. Two crucial elements in 10151 have been lacking. They are the binding decision-making by a neutral party and the requirement to apply a just cause standard. I use the expression providing job parity and job security for a reason. Even a cursory survey of contracts and labor agreements around the state will show near unanimity in just cause standard before a binding neutral hearing. These standards are ubiquitous in other states as well. These are not radical changes, but simple corrections to bring protections of teachers' job security in line with other public employees, such as police, road workers, public health nurses, custodians, administrative staff, and numerous others. I've seen firsthand examples of failures of the current form of 10151. In my 11 years at CEA, I have never had a teacher go before a board hearing to contest a recommendation to terminate. Instead, in nearly every instance, the teacher resigns with a separation agreement. This is not because of overwhelming evidence against the teacher. On the contrary, in several instances, the teacher had strong arguments against termination. However, the prospect of enduring a difficult hearing before a neutral hearing officer only to achieve a victory that can be quickly reversed by the board after a minimal review is a strong incentive just to go quietly. In the last 3 years, representing 8 school districts, I have worked with 18 teachers putting together resignation agreements. Would any of these teachers have saved their job if they had the opportunity to state their case before a neutral third party using just cause? We will never know, but I do know that several of them would have made different choices regarding resignation. In the current political climate, I feel these protections are even more critical. I am constantly hearing concerns from teachers regarding the difficulties in teaching controversial subjects. I am also hearing concerns from teachers regarding positions that were formerly uncontroversial that have become so after just one school board election. A neutral arbiter applying a just cause standard is the strongest protection for teachers fearing political retribution from groups organized around certain political agendas. The concept of tenure was originally designed specifically for this purpose of protecting teachers from this type of political fickleness. It is time that Connecticut teachers have the same level of protection so they can focus on teaching and doing what's best for kids. I also want to go off script for just a second and put this in context so that you understand how real these things are. Kate Diaz talked about, concerns that we have about members making political speech or things like that, suffering the consequences of that. While I can't get into the detail or name the names, CEA has seen resignations after the 2024 election from teachers that have felt political pressure because of comments they made. This is not a unique or a speculative thing. This is part of what we are living. This is the reality we are in. And while I was in this hearing, I got a text from one of my local presidents that said that the school board had just received a letter from a committee that demanded they were repealing DEI in the school district or they would turn it over to the proper authorities. These are the types of political threats that our schools are seeing today. And this is why this is so vital to have. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Representative Canino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming to testify today. I appreciate the 7 points of just cause that was laid out in the testimony. It really was illuminating for me. Just a question on the events where there is this neutral arbitration. We heard from the opposition that this takes power away from the district or from the Board of Education. And one of those neutral arbitration scenarios, which are good, Senate Chair elucidated very eloquently. What opportunities does the district have to make their case, to present their facts and to make the voice heard?
Well, Representative, I would say, first of all, the district already had the power to fire that teacher initially. Okay, and that is the decision that is taken by the superintendent in almost every case. Where the problem lies is that the superintendent is not an unbiased person. The superintendent is one side of an argument. And so to not have someone who is neutral to look at that and ensure that it's being done correctly and fairly means that the person who is being fired has virtually no rights. And so that's why the hearing process is part of 10-151. But I would say the hearing process in 10-151 is there for show more than substance. And what happens is a superintendent decides to fire a person. In the unlikely event that the person has the guts to go to a hearing, they go to a hearing, they present their case. If the fact finder finds that the person who was fired prevailed, and they write a recommendation that this person should be brought back to work, now the Board of Ed has a decision to make. And when the Board of Ed looks at this, they can either take the recommendation of this fact finder who they've never met, or they can back up their own superintendent who they chose, they hired, and they put their faith in to run their school district. It's very hard for a Board of Ed to go against their own hand-chosen employee like that. And so that's why we keep saying that the process is one in which the person is doomed from the start. And so to say that the board has no rights, I think is very misleading. The board has all of the rights in this process.
I appreciate that perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Kushner.
I would just say that to your question also, in that process of fact-finding or arbitration, the employer, in this case, the superintendent, they put on a case and they have equal access to present their case. It's not a one-sided process. So they have equal time. If there's briefs that are allowed, then they have the same amount of time to prepare those briefs. So it is a very neutral setting where both parties have access, the same access to the neutral arbitrator. But I want to reinforce something that the last speaker mentioned, because it happened recently in my school district. I was discussing coming and speaking about being the elected senator and how we're presenting legislation, how we work on bills, how we present bills, how we pass bills. And the teacher was afraid to have me come to the class because they had already been reported by a parent that they were teaching critical race theory, which had nothing to do with what they were teaching or with what I was going to go speak about. But there is this atmosphere that is, I think very unfortunate, because one of the greatest things I think we do as legislators is when we go speak to young people in schools to explain the political process and how laws and what we do in government and how laws are passed. So I think your highlighting of that has recently been my experience as well. And it's unfortunate and I think one of the main reasons why we're hearing this piece of legislation in this committee at this time is because it could lead to people who are not lawyers or judges making the wrong decision. So thank you for that comment, though it was important.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you guys again for testifying. It's kind of like with the last group. One of the things that I want to touch on, and you kind of started to allude to it, is as we are trying to retain teachers, we're trying to diversify the pool of teachers. And we've got many initiatives that the Education Committee and the governor and others have been working on to diversify the teaching field, bring more men into the classroom as well. These are processes, as you kind of just explained, that are in jeopardy based off of those attacks, and they're not being a mediation way of them feeling secure and protected. So could you talk a little bit about just that part and how that could be something, without this protection, that could hurt some of those younger teachers that are really, even though they're going through the teacher residency programs and alternative routes, they're still non-tenured for a period of time, and how their speech, how they teach, their reaction to students, their life experiences that relate to students could impact them.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question. I think that is crucial right now because we do, teachers are very strong advocates for their students. They're advocates for their communities. They're advocates for programs that really help to elevate people. A lot of our efforts recently to try to diversify our workforce, to bring more teachers into the profession from communities that have not been represented as well. I do think if there's political moves to kind of change that, it puts pressure on those teachers that have participated in it, as well as those administrators even who want to advocate for those types of things. I think it's unfortunate, but if the final decision maker in your employment is a person who is themselves beholding to the electorate, I don't know that that's the same as a neutral arbiter when you're having political questions being brought to bear. I think a lot of boards may actually welcome the decision being taken out of their hands when they have a hostile community group that is trying to get rid of things like DEI or programs that they want to have. If they can't have that power to fire people who are doing things like that, and it's a neutral person that's just making that decision based on the law, not on politics, I think it gives even boards protections from these community groups and organizing of taking away programs that I think are really vital to the best interest of the states. So does that address the?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I see no hands. Thank you for being here today and your thorough explanation of the, and in terms of the amendment that you proposed or that you suggested, if you have, certainly we always accept those comments and recommendations from folks. If you have the ability to put in writing how you would address that through amendment, we don't amend things at this point, but we do substitute language before we bring a bill out of committee, and certainly interested in getting this right. So thank you. Next up, I think we're going online. Maybe. Matthew Macaluso. He's number 23. he's not here. If he does join us, we can go back to him. Next here in person, I believe, is Jason Scavoto. Scavoto, did I say that correctly? Scavato. Thank you.
Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Jason Scavato. I'm a high school English teacher at Manchester High School, and I'm here to speak. And I also provided written testimony about Senate Bill 1371. This is my 23rd year as an educator, and I've served districts in Connecticut as a teacher leader, an administrator, and most importantly, as a social justice advocate. I've been honored to present at the annual CIRC Conference on Dismantling Systemic Racism and at multiple conferences hosted by UConn. I've had numerous parents and students thank me for the work I've done to uplift the voices of our students, including writing articles in local newspapers about the work that I've been doing. However, I almost left the profession a few years ago. I was beginning my doctoral work and serving as a department chair. One of the assistant principals had come to me and asked if I'd be willing to leverage my leadership capacity to promote diversity initiatives within my district. I happily agreed, as it was an opportunity to ensure that all of our students were validated, which was directly in line with the work I was doing in my doctoral program. Within a 3-month period of time, I helped to create a strong gender sexuality alliance, a young women's leadership coalition, and a racial diversity club. I also partnered with a group of teachers to bring a diversity day and the ADL's Truth About Hate to our school. All of the teachers and students involved in all of these clubs volunteered their time, their expertise, and caring to make our schools a better place. In response to that, I wrote a letter to the Board of Education thanking these individuals for their dedication to validating the voices of our most marginalized students. To my surprise, I was invited into a meeting with the building principal. As I entered the room, I noticed that the union president, an assistant principal, and the principal were all present. I found myself in a disciplinary meeting with no notice as to why. I was accused of undermining the superintendent of schools by pursuing diversity work in the school, though I had been invited to do so by a building administrator. Now, it's important to note that I previously needed to file a Title IX complaint against this superintendent when he accused me of talking about my weird religious beliefs during class. An incident that, when investigated, was found to be fabricated and untrue, but ultimately led to me being passed up for a promotion. During this meeting, I asked what policy I had violated, and I was told by the principal, well, there isn't any policy that you violated. I asked if I had jeopardized the safety of anyone. And again, no. I asked what evidence indicated that I needed to be disciplined, and I was told that I was impulsive for sending the letter to the Board of Education. I then pointed out that I was given no due process rights and that my work environment was becoming toxic. The building principal then issued me a written discipline as directed by the superintendent of schools. This discipline included a formal disciplinary letter in my file, as well as a negative review of practice being included in my evaluation for that school year. I had violated no stated policy. I had acted in compliance with a direct superior's request. I had not endangered anyone. If anything, the work I provided a greater sense of security for children who so often don't feel safe. And yet,
Mr. Scavato, your time is almost up. Please conclude your remarks.
And yet I was at the risk of being terminated. So I did decide to resign. I hadn't secured a new position and began to look at what marketable skills I had. Luckily, I found my home in Manchester with a superintendent and a board of education that cares about their teachers, a leadership that believes all students of all backgrounds matter, a group of colleagues that continue to do the hard work needed to support our students, and a diverse group of students that teach me more about being a good human than I could ever teach them every single day. However, that's not the case for most educators. I'm asking that you please pass Senate Bill 1371 so that teachers can have the support and the protections afforded to other professionals. Thank you so much for your time.
Seeing no hands, thank you for your testimony today, Mr. Scavato. Up next, we have Carrie Cassidy.
Good afternoon, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, Representative Weir, and distinguished members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. My name is Carrie Cassidy. I'm a teacher from Stonington with 25 years of experience. I strongly support Senate Bill 1371, which addresses teacher terminations by making sure decisions from neutral arbitrators are final and binding for school boards. This bill also introduces a just cause standard for teacher discipline, meaning teachers can only be disciplined or fired for a fair, proven reason. This proposal creates a system that removes bias and subjectivity. Right now, teachers don't have the same protections as other staff members. This bill would ensure that teachers are treated fairly, just like other employees in the school system. The just cause standard means that teachers will only be punished or let go for valid reasons. It creates a more just and balanced process. When teachers feel safe and secure in their jobs, they are more likely to stay and keep teaching. Just cause helps to make sure that experienced teachers can't be unfairly fired, which helps schools keep great teachers. And this is important for helping students learn because it means that students get to have the same teachers who know them well. Without just cause, teachers may be afraid to speak up about problems, like unsafe conditions or issues that could affect students. Just cause makes sure teachers can stand up for what's right without worrying about losing their job just because they did. Just cause guarantees a fair and transparent process for addressing disciplinary issues. Teachers are typically given the opportunity to improve performance before facing dismissal. This aligns with principles of fairness and due process. By supporting Senate Bill 1371, we're taking a step toward making the profession more balanced and ensuring that teachers have the same rights and protections as everyone else. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see any hands. So have a great day. Thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have John Moss.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is John Moss. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today in strong support of Senate Bill 1371. I ask that you pass this bill in order to establish a standard for termination of teachers based on just cause, as well as a process in which the decisions of neutral third-party arbitrators are binding. Unlike due and sufficient cause, which has no precise definition, just cause has a very specific meaning. There are 7 criteria that must be met. None of these are outlandish or would tie management's hands when responding to valid disciplinary matters that need a serious response. Just cause doesn't get anyone off the hook automatically, and it doesn't overprotect people who have committed serious infractions. Just cause simply ensures that the employee is treated fairly and equitably. I'm a 5th grade teacher in Avon and the proud president of the Avon Education Association. When bargaining our contract in 2018, our association quickly reached an agreement with the board to include a clear, just cause standard for disciplinary action. I appreciated that our district recognized that the just cause standard benefits everyone, not just the employee. Having well-understood policies that are consistently applied to employees with thorough investigations benefits everyone and just makes sense to everyone. In all my years since the just cause revisions took effect, my superintendent and I have never had a conflict over this because it works for both employees and management, something we both reaffirmed yesterday when discussing my testimony today. We have a shared belief in the importance of treating employees fairly, and we know that when teachers are supported, they're best able to support their students. I also ask that you support the language that calls for binding third-party decisions in termination cases of teachers. There are political, financial, and other pressures that can affect the decisions of even the most objective and fair superintendents and boards of education. Currently, even if the hearing officer supports the reinstatement of the teacher, boards can decide to unilaterally disregard that outcome and move forward with the termination. In a time in which there's increasing political pressure being placed on teachers and schools, shouldn't we make sure that termination is immune from such influences and motivations by keeping the final step of the process impartial? Superintendents and boards may oppose this shift because it would limit their ability to act as they see fit when making the decision to terminate a teacher. But I ask you, if the reason meets the fair, reasonable standards of just cause and can stand the scrutiny of impartial, objective, third-party hearing, what's the concern? And if the case is weak enough that it can stand the scrutiny and tests of just cause, if impartial third-party arbitrators feel that termination is unwarranted, why should we be allowing the termination to proceed? We are proudly a binding arbitration state that values due process in so many areas of labor law. All that I ask is that we apply the very same standards to our hardworking educators. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments? We've had a number of people testify, so this always happens when you're like the fourth or fifth person to testify. There are not as many questions, but thank you for being with us.
No problem at all. Thank you for the opportunity.
Testimony is important, trust me. Okay, next, we have Kristen Basiaga. Did I say that right?
Oh, close enough. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Wonderful. All right, Senators Kushner and Cabrera, Representatives Sanchez and Wilson, and Representative Weir. My name is Kristen Basega, and I'm speaking as the president of the Glastonbury Education Association, a union of more than 500 teachers who in turn nurture over 5,500 Glastonbury students. And I'm speaking in support of SB 1371. The current system of termination for public school employees is unfair. In the current system, teachers may appeal their termination to an impartial panel, but the determination of that panel isn't binding. It's simply a suggestion to the Board of Education. In what other circumstances can an impartial panel see all the facts of the case, hear about all the mitigating circumstances, rule in favor of the employee, and have them still lose their livelihood anyways? I personally have known teachers who have resigned cases that they could have won an appeal, but they felt that the board was just going to fire them anyways. If the panel's results have no consequences, then how fair is that? There are teachers who would still be in the classroom today if our system of termination treated teachers fairly. Teachers deserve to have their termination cases heard by a neutral arbitrator, just like we have in so many other areas of labor law in Connecticut. But the current system of termination for public school employees is unfair. Under the law, there are still 6 ways to terminate a tenured teacher in Connecticut. There's insubordination, there's incompetence, disability, but the very last of those reasons is due insufficient cause. Due insufficient cause is a lower legal bar than the just cause that we're asking for. Due insufficient cause is ambiguous. Due insufficient cause is the standard for teachers, but just cause is the higher bar, is the standard for every other class of public school employee. So I'm not asking that teachers receive special treatment or unreasonable protection. I'm asking for the same treatment as other public school employees for whom just cause requires fair notice, prior enforcement, due process, substantial evidence. So when the investigation occurs, that evidence is actually found and brought forward. Equal treatment, progressive discipline, and consideration of mitigating circumstances. So teachers aren't asking to be shielded from consequences. We're simply asking for the same legal rights in termination as our peers in public education. Our paras, our nurses, our school administrators all have a just cause standard in termination. We're asking for just cause like our police officers and nurses and other public employees. And we're asking for neutral arbitrators who can make meaningful decisions in teacher termination. So please support SB 1371. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Looks like you're in the classroom.
I am. We had an early dismissal, so, timing worked out today.
I like one word I can see up there says fun. So I hope you all had fun in your class today. But I don't think there are any questions because we've had a number of other teachers and representatives who've been testifying on these matters. But we do appreciate your taking the time today to join us and to share your thoughts on this. Much appreciated.
Thank you
Next
so
up,
much.
take care, is Adam Parks on. I don't see him. So we'll go to Ashley Brooksbank. And I note you're from Ridgefield, is that correct?
That is correct.
Oh, well then, what grade are you teaching in? What school are you in?
I'm at the high school and I teach 9 through 12. I teach AP Psychology, AP World History, and General Psychology. So a little bit of everything.
Probably not fair to ask you questions before you testify, so go right ahead.
That's okay. I'm actually testifying fittingly from what was my pumping closet. And so that kind of plays into what I was talking about. Good afternoon, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, and distinguished members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. My name is Ashley Brooksbank. I am a social studies teacher at Ridgefield High School, and I'm here to speak about SB 1030, an act concerning breastfeeding in the workplace. As a new mom, I spent from June 2023 to March 2024 navigating the challenges of pumping at work to be able to feed my son. I was one of the first in my district to experience the protections of the Federal Pump Act, and because of those protections, I was able to successfully pump to feed him for the entire first year of his life. Having reviewed the proposed act, I appreciate Connecticut's effort to implement additional protections for breastfeeding mothers. However, as currently written, the law appears to offer fewer protections and less flexibility compared to the federal law. First, I would like to gently raise a concern regarding the specific language in the Connecticut law, particularly the phrasing that begins with her workplace, in brackets, during her meal or break period, each time such. The wording seems to restrict lactation accommodations to specific breaks or meal periods. While I understand the intent to be reasonable, this restriction could pose significant challenges for new mothers who need to express milk more frequently than what a single break or meal period might allow. As a teacher, I do not have breaks throughout the day, nor the ability to take breaks without another teacher covering my class. One of the great advantages of the revised federal law was the directive that employers must provide, quote, reasonable break time each time such employee has the need to express milk, which offers greater flexibility than Connecticut law currently proposes. This allowed me to advocate for coverage for my class when needing to pump. It would not be possible for many teachers to appropriately pump if they were restricted to only the breaks within their schedule. For example, a new mother returning to work after only 6 weeks or dealing with an oversupply may need to pump as frequently as 1.5 to 2 hours, which would not always align with the designated break times. I personally needed to pump roughly every 3 to 3.5 hours, and even that would not be feasible with my current schedule. I am in my room with my students starting around 7:15, teach until my lunch at 11:29, and teach again from 12:09 to 12:49. I actually have someone covering for me at the moment. And then at the end of the day, I have my break. If I pumped in the morning when waking up to feed my son, I would have pumped at 5 a.m., meaning I would need to pump again around 8, 11:30, and at the end of the school day. It was only because of coverage that I was able to make pumping at school work. As written, the Connecticut law does not seem to align with the realities of the needs of pumping in a less flexible workplace and could inadvertently limit employees' access to necessary accommodation, making an already difficult process potentially impossible. Additionally, the Connecticut law stipulation that employees will, quote, make reasonable efforts to provide a room or other location in close proximity to the work area other than a toilet stall may also present some challenges. While the federal law requires employees to provide a private space for lactation, the Connecticut proposal as written might leave room for ambiguity. My concern is that employers may interpret the requirement as a quote unquote reasonable effort rather than a firm obligation, meaning they could attempt to provide accommodations that are inadequate or even impractical, such as a bathroom stall or a location that doesn't guarantee the necessary privacy and comfort for employees. In a school setting, for example, this might mean a lactating mother could be told the only available space is a staff bathroom, which fails to meet the privacy standards outlined in the federal law. Finally, while I do appreciate the inclusion of provisions for plugging and refrigeration, which go above and beyond the federal law, these are secondary to ensuring that mothers have the basic, unambiguous right to appropriate and flexible space to express milk when needed. Without ensuring that break times are flexible enough and that spaces provided are indeed suitable and private, the additional benefits would be less impactful. In conclusion, while the intent of the legislation is commendable, I urge the committee to revise the language to align more closely with the federal law, ensuring that working mothers in Connecticut are given the necessary protections and accommodations to support their breastfeeding needs. Providing flexible break times and unambiguous accessible lactation spaces is not only a matter of equity, but also supports the health and well-being of both employees and their children. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Weir has a question. Wilson, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Well, Wilson, I apologize. The
It's
W's got me
okay.
confused.
One small question. So I know you talked about the needing to express milk more often than the periods align. One of the things that are questions that I have is when you talk about that being of a concern with the current proposed language. When you went through the process of coming back, of course, into the classroom, was this a process you worked out with your admin to make sure the coverage was there? Could you explain kind of how you went through the process to make sure that you had the adequate space and time?
Yeah, so I came back like 10 weeks. So it was the end of the school year. And we kind of navigated that as it was because we only had a couple weeks left. I came back for the following school year in August. I got my schedule. I reached out to my department chair and my administrator and said, based on the schedule, I can make X, Y, Z break times work, but I will need coverage at this time in order for me to pump. It's like, here's my schedule. I have A day, B day. So one day I needed coverage, the other I didn't. And the administration, because I was the first one who was protected under this new act. So it was a little bit of navigating how this was different from previous federal law. So they worked with me that one of the people in my department had a duty where they were able to come in, stand with my kids for about 15 minutes. I set up my class. It was always the first 15 minutes of that period. So I set it up that in that 15 minutes, they had X, Y, or Z to do. So there was a task that they had that time period to complete. And he would stay in there with them until I was done. And then I would come back in. For the like random off days, like sometimes we have standardized testing. Those days would be like more on a one-on-one basis. If it was a weird situation, I would work it out. But my administration did support me and helped set up a structure that we were able to make it flexible, but I had to advocate for that myself.
All right, thank you so much.
Representative Shake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, well, now it's good afternoon because it's almost 12:45. I wanted to ask you, have you, with any of your colleagues, or do you know, perhaps not even in your district, just other teachers, for those, who have tried to make things work as best as possible, if those mothers, because they weren't able to pump, and I'm asking because I have a background in maternal child nursing. If those mothers who weren't able to pump, did any of them develop mastitis or infections or any additional health problems or concerns?
So I tried to push it a couple times and I didn't have mastitis, but I ended up having some clogs, and then I didn't push it again because that was very uncomfortable. I don't know about like those specific issues. I do know that my coworkers who pumped prior to the enactment of the Federal Pump Act, there are more of them who made the conscious choice to stop pumping because it just wasn't feasible with their schedule, compared to the people I know who have started pumping after, where we have been better able to advocate and say, this is what we need and this is the time that we need and the spaces. So I don't know about like specific health issues aside from myself. But I do know that it forced some people to stop pumping early because they didn't have the time that they needed to be able to do it.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, for those that, in the time allotment of what you were describing, asking for 15 minutes, is 15 minutes sufficient? Or do you think that 20 to 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on by the time you get to the location of where you can go, having the parts to the machine of whatever it is, whether it's, a mobile or you have to set up the entire thing yourself, and then to collect, and then to clean, and then to clean the parts, and then to get yourself back together so that you can then walk back into, in your case, the classroom. Is 15 minutes enough?
To me, I only had one time where I needed coverage. So I knew that that session was going to be shorter because it made my life easier as well to be able to get back and not have to plan like a huge whole activity. I would then, right after that period, pump sooner. I think that if you are having an actual pumping session, the reality is it's probably at least half an hour, if not more. I think for elementary school teachers, their schedules are very different than a high school teacher. There's a lot less flexibility. And so for them, carving out that 30, maybe 45 minutes, same for special education, where they have in some ways more flexible schedules that they can set up their time providing one-on-one meetings. But if you are not someone who has those set break periods where you're going to get 30 minutes in an hour that you can use, I do think that you need to have at least that 30 minutes, personally.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, with what you're describing, it sounds like employees are really accommodating the employer and the scope of what it is that they're doing for work. I mean, no matter if we're talking about teaching or other different labor sectors, the intention is, in my opinion, good in trying to support working mothers, but in the application of what is happening in real time to actually provide a clean, safe, designated space, and what it is that you need in order to do that. From also what I'm hearing from you, I feel like a lot of people think that, and if you agree or disagree, I feel like a lot of people consider, when moms have to pump, that's something that only happens like twice a day. Right. And especially for new moms, in those first several months, or in your case, 10 weeks, every 3 to 4 hours is critical for supply. And then to make sure that you are taken care of as well, in addition to the nutritional needs of your child.
Ms. Brooksbank, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure on the question that you want me to. I agree with everything you said. I do think that we, as working mothers who are trying to pump, do the best we can to make it possible to work in a situation like I pumped through almost every single lunch that I had from August to March last year to make it work, because that was what had to be done. And it's the nature of the situation. I don't think that it is a choice that I made in some regards, but it's not really a choice that I make for this to be something happening to my body, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. That does make sense, because where I was going was, having choices, and we've had this discussion on other issues here in this committee, but the concept of choice and what does that mean, and then being constrained into, in this case, a system of where we have laws, but it's not giving you the full ability to fully exercise the needs that you and your newborn child need in order to fully, have an optimal health outcome. It sounds very stressful, everything that you described, and you're making it work. And there's a million moms out there who make it work as best as they can. But it shouldn't have to be so difficult and challenging. And I don't feel comfortable hearing that workers are doing even more to try and accommodate their employer versus trying to really reach more of a compromise and a balance in trying to make these things work. So thank you for sharing all the information.
Thank you for your testimony today, Ashley, and look forward to meeting you someday. You have a great high school there. I have visited many times since I'm the senator for that part of Ridgefield. So
Thank you. And thank you for always coming to our candidates assembly. They definitely appreciate it.
That's the best. Very cool. All right, thank you. Next up, we have, is Mackenzie on? I don't see Mackenzie. Oh, you're here in person. Yay. I had you down as remote, so that's great that you could make it.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Mackenzie Hurtado. I currently serve as Vice President of the State Vocational Federation of Teachers, which represents over 1,300 CTEX teachers across Connecticut. Prior to my current role, I taught math at AI Prince Tech in Hartford. I'm here today in support of House Bill 7047. Teacher vacancies have an immediate and significant impact on students. I did not have to look far to find an example of this. My first day teaching at CTEX was Friday, May 1st, 2015. It's a day that is burned into my brain because starting a teaching job on a Friday in May is just crazy. I walked into 125 sophomores who didn't have a math teacher for 5 months, and I had a month and a half to remedy that. A large gap in subjects like algebra or geometry can negatively impact a student's entire high school career. I wish I could say that this situation was rare in our district, but unfortunately, it's very common and continues to happen. Just this month, I had a special education teacher reach out who had transferred, and her DH had been informed that by the time the position is posted, they should not expect to have a replacement until next school year. This vacancy affects not only the students on the teacher's caseload, but also the classes she co-teaches and the resource classes she manages. This results in her colleagues having to absorb additional students onto their caseloads, her responsibilities, which then in turn impacts their students. In some schools, we have had vacancies that were open for years. Students have gone through half of their high school careers without a certified shop or academic teacher. Last year, a parent threatened to sue our district because we had a student that was left without a math teacher. After the state's silver tsunami and subsequent hiring freezes, we had students, many of them special education students, whose schedules were filled with classes that were vacant teachers. This problem does not just affect our students without a teacher, it burdens other teachers who are stretched thin, covering additional classes, handling double duties, grading and planning for vacancies that has a ripple effect on all of our students and our school climate. Many of our retiring teachers do give notice early, hoping their positions will be filled. However, our experience shows that the position does not get processed or posted until after the position is vacated, and then that takes months to fill. By that time, we miss out on an opportunity to hire new teachers graduating from teaching programs, and students usually start the school year with no teacher. Our vacancies need to be filled urgently. When a certified teacher leaves the position should not have to go through the lengthy reauthorization processes. We are doing a disservice to our students and are unable to provide them with the education that they deserve. This hampers our ability to produce well-trained, educated graduates who are prepared for the workforce. We have a responsibility to our students and to the state of Connecticut, and this bill will help us properly staff our schools to fulfill that responsibility. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Wilson.
Thank you for your testimony. If I'm correct, in Governor Lamont's budget proposal, he talks about eliminating certain fees when it comes to certain certification registrations and whatnot. I know within the CTEX system, you've got the individuals who may have been in the trade a number of years. Do you think something like that will help also on top of this?
I think it will definitely help us to have more teachers join us and make the process a little bit easier. But the problem that we're really seeing is that the positions aren't even posted. And then when they are posted, the time it takes to fill them is so long. People will just leave even the interview process because it's such a long process for them to complete.
And through you, last question that I have is, what's the average length that it takes to get an individual through the interview process, hiring, onboarding, the whole nine?
I don't know the average length. I will tell you, it took me 6 months, and that was pretty normal. Most people that I talk to, it's months.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and thank you for being with us in person today. And then we have Logan Place, who is with us remotely. Go ahead, Logan.
Hi, good afternoon, Senator Kushner, Representative Sanchez, Senator Sampson, Representative Weir, and members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. My name is Logan Place. I'm an attorney at Livingston, Adler, Polda, Meiklejohn, and Kelly, and a co-coordinator with the State Employee Bargaining Agent Coalition, also known as CBAC. On behalf of CBAC, I submit this testimony in general support of HB 7047, an act requiring automatic posting of certain state jobs. However, we also believe that there are changes that should be made to strengthen the legislation to help achieve its goals. So the state has an ongoing recruitment and retention problem, and there are various reasons for this, including stressful and sometimes dangerous working conditions, which are exacerbated by understaffing, workers leaving for higher paid jobs in the private sector, and negative changes to the pension plan, which historically serves as a critical tool for retaining workers, particularly in the midpoint of their careers. And while all of those underlying recruitment and retention issues do need to be addressed, this bill would be a good step in helping to speed up the process for filling the many vacancies by automatically posting the position in certain departments. Delays in the hiring process means positions remain vacant longer. This results in reduced services for the public and more stressful and often more dangerous working conditions for state employees who are working understaffed, which is itself a retention issue. This bill will remove some of the unnecessary delays in the hiring process. While this bill as drafted is a good start, CBAC would like to work with the committee to improve it. One of our concerns is that the bill requires the state to post the position, but it doesn't require the state to actually fill the position or take any of the other steps that Ms. Hurtado was speaking of just a moment ago, from the time it's posted to the time it's filled. That's also significant delays. So we think that this bill could be strengthened by requiring the state to fill the position in a reasonable amount of time from the time that the position is posted, provided, of course, that there's qualified candidates. Thank you, and we look forward to working with the committee on making this bill better.
Thank you, Representative Shake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. In your opinion, for the recommendation of filling the position, do you have a timeline of what you would consider to be appropriate?
So this legislation covers a lot of would cover a lot of positions. So it's not just the educators at SVFT, right? It covers a number of agencies. So I don't want to say a blanket statement for all of them because that would maybe in part depend on how many candidates there are. But certainly six months is too long. These could be filled a lot quicker, and it's the approval process. Sometimes it's because an agency, is caught up with other things and they're not making this a priority. Sometimes it may be because the agency or OPM is looking for cost savings by leaving positions vacant, right? And that really shouldn't happen because these positions are appropriated and budgeted for. So I don't want to give a blanket statement on the exact time frame on when it should be, but it should certainly be faster than the 6 months or even longer that we're currently seeing.
Thank you. And I apologize because we've just been hearing from so many wonderful educators. I think my brain was just thinking about, education. But to your point with all the different departments, you're absolutely correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. I would say that I think it's important that we meet with you relatively soon to hear other ways that you would see to improve the process. I know we did have a whole task force on state employment a few years ago. And from that work that we did in a working group in the task force, I know there were many agreements that were reached between the Department of Administrative Services and CBAC of ways to make some improvement. So if there's more we can do along those lines, I think it's most productive when we bring people together from DAS and from CBAC to have those conversations. But I know that there is an interest in, on the DAS side, I've heard that there's an interest in making sure that what we're doing, you know, certainly we don't want to undo any of the work that's been done, but also if we can make improvements, the best way is probably to get people in a room to have that conversation. So thank you for testifying and bringing that to our attention, and we'll see where we can take it from here.
Absolutely. Just we'll reach out and try to set up that meeting. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Is Zachary McEwen here? And he's not online. So I believe that everyone that had signed up to testify either testified or wasn't here when their turn came. Is there anyone else in the room who didn't sign up or who didn't get called? Seeing no hands going up, that concludes our public hearing for today. The next meeting of the Labor and Public Employees Committee will be a public hearing on March 4th. That starts at what time?
11 a.m.
And that starts at 11 a.m. and the bulletin will notify what room we're in. But thank you all for being here today.